Welcome to the Vibrant Health Podcast with your hosts, Lydia Shatney and Jessica Espinoza. Lydia is a nutritional therapist and founder of Divine Health from the Inside Out. Jessica is a real food wellness educator and founder of the website, DeliciousObsessions.com. Since this is a health-related podcast, it should be noted that the hosts are not licensed medical professionals. The information and advice provided in this podcast is not intended to diagnose, treat, or prescribe for any illness or health issue and should not be construed as medical advice. And now, here are the hosts of Vibrant Health Podcast, Lydia Shatney and Jessica Espinoza.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode number 29 of the Vibrant Health Podcast. I am Jessica from DeliciousObsessions.com and JessicaEspinoza.com, and I'm here with my co-host, Lydia of Divine Health from the InsideOut.com. And we're back today with another one of our favorite topics, and this time we're going to be talking all about the thyroid. So we want to go over the basics of thyroid function, why it's important to our health, why we want it to function optimally, and then we want to talk about how we can actually support the thyroid through the use of minerals. So Lydia, are you as excited as I am to talk about this today? We always love talking about thyroid stuff.
I am, because this is not something most people are covering yet, and it's so important. And, with individuals I see, 80% of them have a severe mineral imbalance that affects the thyroid health. So it's so prevalent. It's just so prevalent, and it's not something you're going to see through your hormones and, the typical thyroid markers that people are looking at. And so it's really pretty good information to start to share with people.
Absolutely. So before we dive into the mineral aspects, let's talk a little bit kind of like a basic thyroid 101, because I know we're going to have some listeners who may not quite be familiar with what the thyroid does in the body, what the thyroid hormone is responsible for, and maybe they have just either heard about thyroid problems or maybe they just got a diagnosis with some sort of thyroid problem. So let's kind of give them a little primer before we dive into the nitty-gritty stuff.
Yeah, sure. A lot of people don't even know where their thyroid gland is. So it's located, a thyroid gland is a butterfly-shaped gland. It's located within your throat. So you tip your head back and you kind of run your finger down your throat. At some point, you should feel like a little tiny bump. That's where your thyroid, the center of it is, and then it spreads out across your throat there. It's really kind of like a butterfly Band-Aid. Anyway, it regulates your metabolic rate, your metabolism. And thyroid hormone affects every single cell in your body, and you have trillions of these. So it's pretty darn important. It regulates all your metabolic activities. It's one of your main energy-producing glands alongside the adrenals. So you can imagine if you have thyroid issues, your energy and your metabolism is going to be a big problem for you. And that is so common. The major function of the thyroid hormones is actually to speed up the metabolic rate. So let's say it's not working right, you're going to feel really slowed down, tired, sluggish, that kind of thing. Moods will follow, digestion will follow, all kinds of things are going to slow down. So when our metabolic rate actually increases, like it should, we turn our food into energy more efficiently. And when we have a really good diet, we're going to get plenty of nutrient-dense food for our metabolic health, but that's not always going to be enough, unfortunately, when our thyroid is really shot. So when you have less than optimal thyroid health, let's just be honest, most people do. I don't know, not too many people have happy thyroid health right now. When you have this less than optimal thyroid, let's just go with the slower thyroid presentation versus some hyperthyroid issues, because that's less common. You're going to need to eat quicker burning sources of fuel to get your energy, because why? You can't rely on the energy you're supposed to get from the gland to begin with. So guess what? You got to get it from your food. So this is where starchy carbs, and this can be, a variety of things. It could be those root veggies. It could be some properly prepared grains, healthy fruits, maybe paired with some other things too. But those starchy carbs are really going to be key because they're more nutrient dense. They are complex carbohydrates and they're quick. sources of energy. So you want to make sure you're getting those for quick energy. But, that figuring that out is a whole, complicated thing. So everyone will be different. But I just want to make sure, if you're listening, that if you have sluggish energy, get in some of those complex carbohydrates.
Mm-hmm. So what exactly does the thyroid hormone do in the body?
Well, it does a bunch of stuff. It's going to regulate your heartbeat. It'll keep you warm. So if you're one of those who has the cold hands and feet, and you're always cold, your thyroid is probably not very effective. Speeds up your metabolism so you can lose weight if you need to or maintain your weight. It improves muscle strength. It helps to replenish dying cells with healthy ones. It helps grow your hair and your nails. It helps give you regularity. It improves your ability to conceive, reduces sensations of pain, and it actually should make you be happy and content if your thyroid hormone is adequate and working right. So if there's any difficulty at all, you can imagine you're not going to be a very happy, shiny person. So if you have problem, with any thyroid hormone production at all, the transportation into the cell or even activation, you're going to have some problems. And we see that. It's very pervasive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, almost everybody I know has some level of thyroid, dysregulation. It's rare that you meet somebody who doesn't have some either symptoms or diagnosed with some sort of thyroid problem. So it's pretty sad that our world has come to this, and that society as a whole, we're just so unhealthy.
Yeah, no, it is. So definitely.
Do you want to talk a little bit about you can get a little technical about like the way that the thyroid hormones are made and kind of what's needed for that process?
Sure. Yeah, so this is like the technical stuff that, I mean, you kind of want to hear it at least, right? So
yes.
In order to make thyroid hormone, your thyroid gland needs tyrosine, which is an amino acid, and it needs iodine atoms. And the thyroid gland produces three main hormones: thyroxine, which is usually called T4, triiodothyronine, which I always have trouble saying these, by the way, and that's called T3, and calcitonin. And the T4 hormone means a tyrosine attached to 4 iodines, and the T3 means a tyrosine attached to 3 iodine. And then in the body, T4 is kind of like the storage hormone. So think of this like you have money in the bank, while T3 is the active hormone your body's actually able to access and use, like currency. Like, you took the money out of the bank, now you got it in your pocket and you can use it, right?
Right.
So, and you need both. You need the storage and the active. Calcitonin, that actually plays a role as an antagonist to parathyroid hormone, and they together, the parathyroid and the thyroid, regulate your calcium level in the tissues. Now, keep that in your mind for a second, and we're going to talk about it later. Okay, so then we want to know that the thyroid is a complex endocrine gland that works with other endocrine glands and hormonal mediators. So, now we know what it produces, the hormone. We want to make sure whenever you are thinking of thyroid care, you're supporting the whole body, the whole endocrine system, as well as the thyroid, okay? Because a lot of times what I'm hearing, and I don't know, maybe you've heard this too, is people are going to get treated just for their thyroid, right? So they're getting their good grief. Sorry. I'm like so excited. I'm like talking over myself. They're getting their hormones tested, right? And then they're like, okay, your hormones are imbalanced, so you have hyperthyroidism. Here, you need some medication, and that's it, right?
Yeah,
and then there's nothing else.
Historically been my experience, ever since I've been dealing with thyroid issues for almost 10 years now. And that's, most doctors are just, okay, here's your lab, you're out of range, take this thyroid medication and send you on your way.
Right. And sometimes it's even just like T4 replacement hormone, and maybe maybe that's not even enough in some cases. So I think it's getting a little bit better, and I think people are getting more educated on this and everything, but still, it's really the standard of care is often to just test TSH, which really is only, what your brain is telling your body that it wants, not, anything else. So that's not enough. You need to, if your TSH is off, then you need to know a lot more than just that, right?
Yep.
Anyway, so the good news is when we start to understand more about this, we can expect more for ourselves. And we need to understand that there is a relationship of minerals to the entire endocrine system. And I've talked about this before, especially when we talk about adrenals. But we really do have the potential to support thyroid much better when we understand that piece. And I want to get into that in a minute. But when you're addressing any endocrine issue, you got to support the key essentials to normal function first. So, getting thyroid hormone is, I know some people, oh, yeah, I'm on Synthroid, I feel great. Blech. That's it. They haven't done a darn other thing, right? Well, we have nutritional deficiencies. We need good healthy fats, and we need good fatty acid balance and metabolism. We need to be able to digest our food, and, we need to be able to digest protein because we need, those nutrients and those amino acids. We need good liver function, for goodness sakes. And then there can be other deeper issues. But some of these basics, nobody's dealing with, unless you're more holistic minded to begin with. And that's what nutritional therapy is set up to do, to start to say, hey, where can we get in here and start helping all these systems function better? Like, what can we start to do? So, for example, like liver conjugation problems can significantly impair hormone levels from the thyroid as well as the gonads or the adrenal cortex. So optimizing your liver function is going to be really helpful because, just going on thyroid hormone alone isn't the underlying reason why you're imbalanced to begin with. So when we optimize liver function, that's going to be really hugely helpful. So in order for T4 to become T3, so that's the storage inactive to the, actual active form, it has to be converted in this, specific biochemical reaction. So there's things that are needed for that to take place, and selenium is one of them. And so the conversion is going to take place in your liver primarily, and then it will also take place a little bit in your gut. And then it's also going to go into the peripheral tissues and other organs. So the process of turning T4 into T3 is, it's a little complex, but it requires selenium to activate the enzyme which performs that task to begin with. So that's pretty important. Now, you all know that I do hair tissue mineral analysis, and every single one I've seen, I saw one person that had good selenium. One. And guess what? She was like eating like lots of sardines, and most people aren't going to do that. So anyway, most people are deficient in selenium. You're also going to really be struggling with selenium if you have any mercury issues. So if you have amalgams and you have for your whole life, your body's going to hoard any selenium. So, that's one little aside there. So minerals are really, really crucial for thyroid to function optimally. And mineral deficiency can actually cause a sluggish conversion of your T4 to T3. And selenium is just one example. But you also need B complex, you need vitamin D to be working right, and that's not by pushing it up with taking a lot of it either. It's very complicated. But that can be improved by magnesium, and magnesium is another biggie. Folate is important, especially if you have some of these MTHFR issues, right? And most people aren't eating liver anymore, and, so we're just not getting adequate folate. Zinc is another one. And then, you can get more support for your thyroid health with adaptogenic herbs. But then iodine's a biggie as well, and that's obvious. I think most people know that. But it's required for the T4 hormone to be synthesized in the first place.
Right.
So, and figuring out iodine can be a little tricky, too.
Yeah, I was just going to say, don't go out and just start taking iodine.
Yeah, please don't go take
tricky. Probably more so than other things, really. You can do some bad stuff to your body if you overdo the iodine.
Well, it's tricky. I mean, yeah, you can cause a reaction, and that's the thing. If you don't understand it all, you don't understand what happens there. You don't want to have that happening and not know how to handle it. So please don't run out and take any of these things we're talking about, but we just want to explain all this information so you have more to go on when you're looking for better care. And then we've got, thyroid hormone activity along with other hormones is going to be really sensitive to stress as well as toxins such as the halogen group. That's, bromine, bromide, chlorine, chloride, fluoride, all that. Toxic metals, medications, because all of this stuff is going to interfere with the synthesis, the transport, and utilization of that T4, the thyroxine, and the T3. Obviously. So, and then there's more. There's, we can have increased levels of cortisol in the body. That's people who are in their fight or flight, right? And that's produced in the adrenal cortex. And this can also affect production of your T3. So it ends up becoming an active form, the reverse T3. And this binds to thyroid hormone receptors on the cells, causing an increase in your tissue resistance to T3. And T3 is that hormone we need to spend, like we need it, like it's our active thyroid hormone, and we use it by ourselves. So it's important to understand that serum testing can show normal hormone levels, but a lot of times nobody's checking reverse T3. So that's something to know. And if it is checked, someone might be experiencing the effects of low hormone even in the presence of adequate levels due to this factor. So, and I'm still, trying to wrap my brain around this whole thing too, because it's a lot to understand and figure out how to make the body work better in light of all of these dysfunctions. So when reverse T3 levels are elevated, it's basically a strong signal that the body is using some kind of protective mechanism to help dampen the effect of the thyroid hormone. So it'll force the body with hormones at this time, and you won't necessarily resolve your symptoms if that's the case. So people might feel worse, and so it's complicated when you don't understand the rest of how the body's working. If someone's given too much hormone and they feel like crap, but they maybe really need it, their adrenals could be, part of the problem there too. So it's important to know that when the adrenals are fatigued, they have to be supported as well in order for your thyroid hormone to be effective and to regain optimal effect in the body, both whether you're on the hormone support-wise additionally or, for your own body apart from taking exogenous, you know what I mean? So either way, we have to support the adrenals to really help improve that process.
Right.
I hope that made sense.
Yeah, it's a good refresher for me, actually, because I made some connections that I haven't made in the past about the reverse T3, actually. But yeah, I think that was good. I mean, some people who are new to this, their eyes may have glazed over at this point.
Yeah, I know.
At least you've heard it. Like, it's not super critical that you understand all of this right now. We're just here to kind of, help you start thinking about it and maybe be a little bit more, whenever your doctor is running the thyroid labs, you might, recognize, oh, that was reverse T3. I remember Lydia talking about that. So
well, but then a lot of times that's not a marker that's run, so you may want to ask for that.
You do have to, because they typically will a lot of doctors will just run your TSH. Sometimes they will run T4 and T3, but it kind of depends. But I ask my doctor every year when I do the full thyroid panel, or every 6 months, or however often I get them done. Through her, I just tell her, I give her the list. I say, these are the ones I want run. She doesn't really feel like reverse T3 is all that important, but I still want to get that number just I can see. Right.
It is important. It's totally important. So, and that's a whole big complicated, we're not totally going into that entirely because my goal is more to help people understand now in light of all of that and in light of, maybe you're going and you're getting your thyroid labs done and everything and you're still feeling like you just haven't gotten enough support. I actually love using the HTMA, and we're going to talk about minerals in a second, but it's a great way to show, even if your labs are showing up normal, but you still feel like you have all these hypothyroid symptoms, there's some other key things that we can see. And it's one of the most common patterns I see is basically a hypothyroid state. Mm-hmm. So it's critical you understand the benefits and the limitations of both. So HTMA and serum testing combined is really a powerful packed punch there, because you're going to see more from the HTMA is going to show you your cellular sensitivity to whatever thyroid hormone you are making, or how much effect the hormone has in the body. So that is pretty darn important. So it's critical to understand that, you could be being given hormone, or you could be testing fine, and your body's just not getting it into the cells properly. Mm-hmm. So there's really a lot to know, but I want to talk about these minerals just because I want you to hear it and start to realize there's more to the whole picture. So when it comes to minerals, and let's say you have a hair analysis, maybe you haven't done it yet, but let's say you have one in front of you. There's going to be this one marker that is going to be your thyroid marker, and there's a lot of information on the hair test we can understand better about thyroid health, but this one in particular, it's the ratio of calcium to potassium, okay? And this ratio, when it is elevated, indicates sluggish thyroid activity at the cellular level. Now, this ratio is the most common ratio I see is really high, and this puts people in a really slowed down, unhealthy parasympathetic state where, they're not getting hormones in the cells well, their digestion is slowed down, maybe they're constipated, maybe they have some trouble with weight. They have all the same symptoms of hypothyroidism, which we're going to talk about in a minute. Mm-hmm. So this pattern is if people have excessive tissue calcium and a really, really low tissue potassium, because the thyroid gland regulates calcium. So the higher the level of hair calcium in general, the lower the effective activity of the thyroid gland. And this occurs because one of the effects of T3 and T4 is to lower calcium levels in the tissues and at times in the blood. So it's known that hyperthyroidism can cause tetany or muscle contractions that are due to low serum calcium. That's just an aside there. Don't sweat that information. But lower calcium is also associated with increased cell permeability. And this will allow more thyroid hormone to enter the cells, increasing the cellular effect of the same amount of circulating serum thyroid hormone. Okay? So the takeaway, high tissue calcium means less effectiveness of the hormones to get in the cell. Low is, they're going to get in there quicker. So you usually are seeing more people with really high calcium. It's very common. Then the potassium is going to be associated with reduced cellular effects of the thyroid hormones as well. And it's known that low potassium is associated with reduced sensitivity of the mitochondrial receptors to thyroid hormone. So low potassium as well as low sodium are associated with reduced cell permeability. So you've got two things when you have a high calcium-potassium ratio, because remember, that's high calcium, low potassium. So that's two things that are impairing making your cells less permeable.
Right.
Okay? So the thyroid hormone's not getting in the cells, no hormones getting in the cells very easily. But remember, thyroid hormone is what we need to kind of give us that boost, and the energy, and it's like kickstarts a lot of things, right?
Right.
So that marker alone is not something you're going to get information from any other test. You're not going to get it from your thyroid hormone panels. You're not going to get it anywhere else. And it's really important, and it's extremely common. And there are certain things that need to be done to help improve that, and you feel so much better. So that, I just want to really stress that, because it's like one of the most common things I'm dealing with folks. Then you heard me talk about selenium a little bit ago. So selenium, and we hear a lot about iodine. Iodine is great, but we don't hear a lot about selenium. I think it's starting to come out more. But selenium is required for 2 steps in thyroid hormone utilization, and it's involved in the deiodination reaction in which the hormone is synthesized. And it's also in the conversion of T4 to T3 in the tissues. Selenium deficiency, listen to this, can cause elevated antibodies and poor thyroid conversion. So if you have hypothyroidism and elevated antibodies and you've never looked at the selenium piece, this is important. Selenium will help improve the T3 activation and transport. So I can say, safely, yes, everyone can probably benefit from going out and getting some selenium, but I can't tell you how much because everyone's a little different. So if you're working with someone, you need to talk to them about how much selenium you need and how to approach that. But even just 200 micrograms can help reduce those thyroid antibodies. So start looking into that if that's the case for you. And then also we have things like estrogen-containing drugs, like a lot of people have been on birth control. That's going to kind of steal your selenium, use it up, and burn through it. So a lot of people are on birth control and, have they have all these thyroid problems. So that's just one more thing adding to the problem. And then if you have amalgams, the mercury fillings in your mouth, that's another piece too. So this is important to know because if you have all 3 of those things going on, you really need to look into selenium.
Right.
And then, our farmlands are selenium deficient. So we can't really rely on our food entirely to get enough, unfortunately. So, and a lot of people are like, oh yeah, I eat Brazil nuts. I get my selenium because, we know Brazil nuts have selenium. But see, I don't feel like that's a good enough answer either because we just really don't know how much selenium we're getting in Brazil nuts. Plus, they're hard to digest. And remember what I said about you slow thyroid people aren't digesting food all that great. So I don't really rely on some Brazil nuts to get selenium either. So, it might be good for some people if they're getting the best quality and they have great digestion, but when you have all 3 things compiled that I just said, you really want to be getting some good selenium. Anyway, I feel like I'm beating that a little bit over the head there, but it's really important.
It's important.
It's really, really a biggie. Now, there's other minerals, and I'll go through these kind of quickly, but there's so many, but the selenium is really big, so that's why I kind of hammered that one. And the calcium, potassium, major big deal. So manganese, this isn't a mineral you hear much about, but thyroxine, T4, is synthesized from iodine and tyrosine through that deiodinase enzyme, and that enzyme works to free the 4th iodine molecule and turn T4 into T3 or reverse T3, because sometimes, it goes into reverse T3. Well, anyway, manganese is needed to permit this whole synthesis.
It blows my mind. I mean, I'm sitting here reading it, and it's just, I have mentioned this to you in the past, the more I learn about the human body and especially how things have to happen on a cellular level, I just honestly am in awe, that we even function at all.
I know. Well, it's pretty.
There's so many tiny things.
It's pretty cool. So remember how you were saying earlier, it's rare that people, don't have thyroid symptoms. Well, I'm not your typical hypothyroid kid. Like if you look at me, I don't look like a thyroid person, right? My eyebrows are fine, my hair's I don't have all of these hypothyroid symptoms. But guess what? And I don't have high tissue calcium, but I do have low tissue potassium, and I have way low manganese, to the floor. My selenium's great, but I can't for the life of me. I've been working on my manganese. So I'm not saying this to upset people or scare them, but there's all these things that come into play that if you haven't even started looking at, you've got some hope to feel better with some of these things in place. But manganese is tricky. So, that's a difficult one. And there's not a lot of research on this yet, but it is really important. Zinc is another one. Low zinc's often found in those with increased thyroid activity. So that's, not the most common scenario, but it really is, it's needed for proper function of many enzymatic processes of thyroid hormone synthesis and utilization. So zinc's pretty key, but, you want to make sure you're balancing zinc with other things. It's not something you just want to go out and take a lot of. Anyway, but there's this one study, and I forget where I found this information, but it showed a relationship between zinc deficiency and elevated antibody levels, especially in people who had autoimmune thyroid disease. So that was interesting. I'll see if I can find that and put it in the notes. And then zinc also increases potassium. So remember how I said low tissue potassium is really common in the people who have hypothyroid issues?
Right.
So we actually need zinc to help improve our potassium. We need other things too, but that's just one of them. So then that will help us have like improved sensitivity to our thyroid hormone at the cellular level.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's go to cadmium. Cadmium interferes with zinc and calcium. So that's, that's kind of important to know if cadmium's an issue too, because it can interfere with other enzyme systems and it can cause symptoms of lower thyroid activity.
What are some of the sources of cadmium? Cigarettes are a source of cadmium, right? If I remember correctly. Where would people be getting cadmium?
Smoking's probably the big one. There's a number. It's even in some seafood now. But people with, like jobs that are more toxic in nature, like if someone works in a car shop or someone who's working with chemicals or paints or all these things. But it is becoming more common in the environment. I've seen a few even really, really young kids with elevated cadmium, and it can be, congenital from the mom. So if mom has cadmium, or if mom has cadmium because her mom smoked, or, whatever, can get passed on. So, but cadmium is going to, interfere with zinc. So usually, giving zinc is really going to help with that. But you won't know until you really take a look there. But just, it's important to make all these connections, right? And then I'll just do two more because these are important too. So we've got elevated heavy metals in general. There's going to be a bunch of them, and they're going to antagonize key nutrients. So mercury, for one, and then copper excess. We can have copper overload and copper deficiency all at the same time, but typically people who have that elevated calcium, like I said, and the really low potassium, they often have a lot of copper stored in their body, okay? Mm-hmm. And often they also have issues with mercury as well. And that can interfere with thyroid activity and result in that lowered thyroid, state. Copper can have an effect on thyroxine, and so that's one thing. But then you've got the halogens. You've got chlorine, fluoride, bromine, bromide. That'll suppress your thyroid as well. And lead.
Right.
Lead can interfere with your calcium metabolism. So there's a bunch of things to know there. And we all are exposed to them to varying degrees, and it's just, it's not, sometimes there's sources that we can remove, but sometimes it's just a part of living in this world and not having the right nutrients to help our body, deal with it. So anyway, so copper will reduce potassium and decrease thyroid activity, while zinc is going to enhance your potassium and enhance thyroid activity. And then elevated copper can actually mimic the effects of an overactive thyroid. So it's interesting because some people can be in a hypothyroid pattern but not feel sluggish. They're more like go, go, go. Mm-hmm. And it's because of the copper. They're more driven, but they're still hypothyroid. Yeah, it is. That's another common thing too. So anyway, but they can have more mixed symptoms, and they can seem not so bad as far as their energy or their drivenness, I should say. Anyway, so that was a lot of information, but and it's easy for me to kind of spew it out because I'm constantly am, and it's part of my daily routine to be talking about this stuff. But I hope that some of it is going to make some connections for people to think about and consider, looking into for themselves, because it's really very helpful to get your minerals balanced and help, your body balance out, kind of gently get rid of heavy metals, but it's such a process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really hope that, as time progresses, that more and more people become aware of the impact that, minerals can have on so many different cellular functions. Like, it's just an area that's not really being addressed, and it's so critical. So hopefully, as time goes on, this information will become a little bit more mainstream. It's never going to become completely mainstream, but hopefully more people will start learning about the importance of, specific minerals and thyroid function and adrenal function and all that, so that they can just start feeling better. I mean, that's the big thing. We've got a lot of people going through life feeling absolutely miserable every day.
Right.
We don't want that.
Right. And they don't even know they have options. I just had someone write to me recently, and she literally thought she had no other choice but the medical path she was on. And she was kind of accepting her body just failing.
Right.
And I was like, oh, no. Don't think like that. There's a lot that could be done, and you could feel better. Mm-hmm. So I don't like that, people feeling like there's no hope, because there's always hope. So
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, was there anything else that you wanted to cover today? We covered a lot of information. I'm sure people's brains are feeling mushy.
I know. Well, you can always go back and reread it. And But, I guess I really just want to emphasize the nutritional status, especially that of minerals and even heavy metals, and how it has a tremendous impact on the thyroid. So many people today are just really suffering with significant symptoms, especially of thyroid dysfunction, and it's just not being supported appropriately. So using information shared today or revealed in a hair test, if you are ready for that, there's a link, you can check that out. But, using this information, you really can support your body. You can help improve your body's ability to secrete hormones better and to have your cells receive them better, because minerals just play such a critical role in this whole process. And we know that we're deficient. We've known since early 1900s. So, Senate they put out a document about this way back then, and we've done nothing to improve the situation. So anyway, so if you have a thyroid treatment in effect now, and it's just not working for you, and it's not doing enough for you, consider the heavy metal body burden and how it can, act as disruptors to your thyroid receptor activity, and consider the mineral piece. It's not the same as looking at your blood levels of minerals at all. It's entirely different, and it's going to show, it's going to show more of the effect upon the cells, and blood is, blood works really hard to stay regulated. So at the expense of your tissues, the blood will look normal or try to stay normal, but it will do so at the expense of your tissues. So when you're taking a tissue sample, which you're using hair, it's going to show a lot more information than often we see in the blood. It takes a long time for it to be really bad showing up in the blood, and then you're already in bad shape, So this is very preventative in nature, and hopefully, people can get this information before they, are too far gone and feeling horrible. I don't want, I'd love to prevent that. So hopefully you'll take this information to heart and think about it, and maybe even look at some of these things, or ask your doctor to look at a red blood cell count of magnesium at the very least, because they should be able to run something like that for you, and just get started somewhere in the process of repairing these critical minerals in the body and start feeling some improvements.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, I guess we'll go ahead and wrap up for today, but we will be back again next week. We really appreciate you guys tuning in. Hopefully this information's been helpful. So we will talk to you guys again soon. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you so much for listening to the Vibrant Health Podcast. We really appreciate you taking time out of your day to listen to the information we're sharing. If this information resonated with you and you know others who could benefit from it, we would love it if you'd share it with them. We'd also be very appreciative if you could leave us a review on iTunes or Stitcher. If you're on our sites or YouTube listening to this, we'll have links down below where you can leave a review. If you're on your phone listening through the app, you can also leave a review directly through the app. It only takes about a minute, super fast, super easy, and your shares and reviews help us reach more people with our message of health and wellness. So we really, really appreciate your support. If you're looking for more information on health and wellness in general, both Lydia and I have a ton of information on our sites. You can find me over at jessicaespinoza.com, which is my main practice website and where I offer my 21-day sugar detox coaching. And in the future, I'm going to be offering nutritional therapy coaching as well. You can also find me on deliciousobsessions.com, which is my main real food and natural living website. You can find Lydia over at divinehealthfromtheinsideout.com, where she offers nutritional therapy consultations and hair tissue mineral analysis services for those who are ready to take their health to the next level. Lastly, if you have any suggestions for topics you'd like us to cover in future episodes, we would absolutely love to hear from you. We want these podcasts to be as informational and inspirational as possible, and we'd love to hear from you and understand exactly what you would like us to cover. You can email us or leave a comment below or even give us a shout out on social media. We both look forward to serving you and inspiring you to live the healthiest, happiest lives possible. Thanks for listening.